we met for the first time, and when he put on that fedora and he strung on that whip, he gave shape and attitude and style and vulnerability. I owe Harrison a great personal debt.
He is the most successful filmmaker who ever lived. Jaws, E.T., Jurassic Park, Schindler's List, the man practically invented the modern blockbuster and then turned around and won Oscars for the most serious films of his generation. But here is the thing nobody tells you. Across 50 years and more than 30 movies, Steven Spielberg keeps reaching for the same small handful of actors, the ones he trusts with his hardest scenes, the ones he calls back again and again, the ones who, by his own admission, left a mark on him that never faded. These are the 6 who got under his skin, and the stories behind why are far stranger, funnier, and more emotional than you would ever guess. The adventurer who saved the day by doing almost nothing. Start with the obvious one, Harrison Ford. Spielberg directed Ford as Indiana Jones 4 separate times across nearly 30 years, from Raiders of the Lost Ark in 1981 to The Crystal Skull in 2008. That alone makes Ford one of the most important actors in his entire career. But the reason Spielberg fell for Ford is captured perfectly in one of the most famous moments in movie history, and it happened almost by accident. They were shooting Raiders in Tunisia, in brutal heat, well over 100 degrees. More than 150 people on the crew had come down with dysentery from the local food and water, and Harrison Ford was one of the sickest. Spielberg, by the way, stayed healthy almost out of paranoia. He had brought his own food from England, and Ford later joked that the director taped his own mouth shut in the shower and traveled with a trunk full of canned spaghetti to avoid getting sick. Now, there was a big scene on the schedule, a huge, elaborate fight where Indy faces off against a master swordsman, a long, choreographed whip versus sword duel that would take days to film. And Ford, who could barely stand and could not stray far from his trailer bathroom, walked up to Spielberg with a different idea. Why not just shoot the guy? Pull out the revolver and end it. Spielberg lit up because he had been thinking the exact same thing. So they did. Indy looks at this showboating swordsman, sighs, pulls out his gun, and casually shoots him dead, right there in the middle of a crowded marketplace. The audience roared. It became one of the biggest laughs in the entire film and one of the most quoted moments in adventure cinema. A scene people still talk about more than 40 years later. A sick, exhausted actor and a director on the same wavelength turned a problem into magic in about 5 minutes. That is the Ford and Spielberg relationship in a nutshell. Total trust. The kind where a star can pitch a wild change on the spot, and the director just knows it is right. Spielberg trusted Ford so much that he later tried to cast him as the lead in Jurassic Park. Ford turned it down, and Spielberg has admitted he was not annoyed. He was crushed. That is how much he wanted him. Because when Harrison Ford is in your frame, the audience instantly believes they are watching a hero. But the next actor on this list could not have been more different. Where Ford was the larger-than-life adventurer, this one was the small, nervous, ordinary guy. And Spielberg saw himself in him. The everyman who was secretly Spielberg himself. Before Harrison Ford, before any of the legends, there was Richard Dreyfuss. And to understand how much Dreyfuss meant to Spielberg, you have to go back to the film that almost ended his career before it started. Jaws, in 1975, was a nightmare to make. The mechanical shark, which the crew nicknamed Bruce after Spielberg's lawyer, barely worked. It had been tested in fresh water and then promptly corroded and broke down the moment it hit the salt water of the ocean. Dreyfuss later said the shark simply never worked, that crew members were constantly yelling into their walkie-talkies that the shark was down again. A shoot that was supposed to take 55 days stretched to 159. Spielberg was convinced his career was finished. He genuinely believed the rumors that he would never work again because no one had ever taken a film so far over schedule. In the middle of that chaos was Richard Dreyfuss, playing the young, motor-mouthed marine biologist Hooper. Dreyfuss had nearly turned the part down, then begged for it after watching one of his other performances and panicking that his career was about to collapse. Spielberg rewrote the whole character to fit him, and the two of them came out of that miserable sinking ship production as creative soulmates. So when Spielberg made his next personal film, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, he wanted Dreyfuss again, even though half of Hollywood was circling the role. Big names like Al Pacino, Dustin Hoffman, Gene Hackman, and Jack Nicholson were all in the conversation. But Dreyfuss campaigned relentlessly. He would walk past Spielberg's office and casually run down the competition, making the case that he was the only right choice. And Spielberg admitted, flat out, that Dreyfuss talked him into it. Here is the deeper reason, though, and it is the most revealing thing about this whole partnership. Spielberg has said that casting Dreyfuss as the obsessed everyman Roy Neary was really a way of casting himself. He compared it to how some directors put a version of themselves on screen through one specific actor. Richard Dreyfuss was Steven Spielberg's on-screen stand-in, his alter ego, the ordinary man staring up at the sky with childlike wonder. Dreyfuss himself gently pushed back on that idea over the years, pointing out that he is his own person, but he also acknowledged the bond, admitting that in some ways he was the more childlike of the two, and that this was exactly why he was right for those films. So that is two actors who became extensions of Spielberg himself. The next one did something almost no actor on Earth can do. He scared Steven Spielberg, the ghost who became a president. In 2012, Spielberg made Lincoln, and the man he needed to play Abraham Lincoln was Daniel Day-Lewis, widely considered the most committed actor of his generation. The only problem was that Day-Lewis had already said no. Spielberg first approached him back in 2003. Day-Lewis turned it down, finding the very idea of himself playing Lincoln almost ridiculous. For years, the role sat with another actor, Liam Neeson, who was attached to play Lincoln for a long time. But as the years dragged on and Neeson got older, he eventually felt he had aged out of it and stepped away. In an act of real grace, Neeson personally called Spielberg and told him to go get Daniel Day-Lewis, that he was the right man for the part. So Spielberg went back, this time with a sharper script that focused only on the final months of Lincoln's life. And finally, Day-Lewis said yes on one condition. He needed a full year to prepare. What he did with that year became legend. He read more than 100 books about Lincoln. He built the president's voice from scratch, choosing a higher, softer tone based on historical descriptions, rather than the booming voice everyone assumed Lincoln had. And when he was ready, he recorded that voice and sent it to Spielberg on a tape marked for the director's eyes only, with a little skull and crossbones drawn on it. Spielberg has said that when he pressed play, he did not hear an actor doing a voice. He felt like Abraham Lincoln was speaking to him directly. On set, it went even further. Day-Lewis never broke character. The entire cast and crew, Spielberg included, addressed him as Mr. President at all times. The English actors in the cast were asked not to use their natural accents around him so the spell would not break. Co-star Sally Field, who played Mary Todd Lincoln, revealed that Day-Lewis would even text her in the voice and language of Lincoln between scenes. And then there is the moment that broke Spielberg. There is a scene where Lincoln delivers a passionate speech to his cabinet about why the amendment to end slavery has to pass now. Day-Lewis performed it in long, unbroken takes, and Spielberg has said that to this day, he has never gotten over it. He was so overwhelmed, so humbled watching it happen in front of him, that he actually had to get up and leave the set. And here is the part that tells you everything. Day-Lewis, still completely in character as Lincoln, got up, came looking for the director, found him in another room, sat down beside him, and put his arms around him to comfort him. Think about that. The actor consoling the most powerful director in the world, without ever stepping out of the role. Day-Lewis won his third Best Actor Oscar for that performance, and Spielberg walked away changed. But for all those once-in-a-lifetime collaborations, there is one actor Spielberg has gone back to more than any other. His true partner across the decades. The partner of a lifetime. If Spielberg has a creative soulmate in the modern era, it is Tom Hanks. The two of them have made 5 films together: Saving Private Ryan, Catch Me If You Can, The Terminal, Bridge of Spies, and The Post. And they have produced a whole string of acclaimed war series together on top of that, including Band of Brothers, The Pacific, and Masters of the Air. Nobody in Spielberg's career has been a steadier presence, and it almost did not happen, because Hanks was scared of it. Before Saving Private Ryan, Hanks was actually reluctant to work with Spielberg, because he had seen friendships destroyed by bad movie-making experiences, and he did not want to risk ruining something good. He did it anyway, and the making of Saving Private Ryan produced one of the best behind-the-scenes stories in Hollywood. Spielberg wanted his actors to feel like real soldiers, so he put the main cast through a genuinely brutal week-long boot camp in the English countryside, run by a hard-as-nails former Marine named Dale Dye. Freezing rain, almost no sleep, heavy packs, constant misery. And the actors were not even allowed to use their real names. They were each assigned a number. Hanks, the biggest star there, was simply Turd Number 1. About 3 days in, the cast had had enough. Cold, exhausted, and pushed to their limit, they took a vote. They were going to quit and walk out of the camp, and every single one of them voted to leave, except one: Tom Hanks. He was the only holdout. He looked at these younger actors, some of them genuine stars in their own right, and quietly convinced them to stay, to push through it, because it would make the film real. One of them, Vin Diesel, later marveled that here was this massive movie star who did not have to be there at all, voting to suffer through it. That moment bonded the cast for life. And it is exactly the kind of leadership Spielberg treasures in him. When Spielberg talks about why Hanks matters so much, he reaches for the highest compliment he can think of. He compares him to James Stewart, the beloved everyman star of classic Hollywood. Spielberg once said that if he had made Saving Private Ryan back in 1951, the only actor he would have wanted for the lead was Jimmy Stewart. And years later, honoring Hanks at a major awards ceremony, Spielberg said his friend's greatest gift is that he gives all of us hope for a world where ordinary people still have a voice. That is the partnership at the heart of Spielberg's later career. But the next actor only made 1 film with him, and yet left a permanent impression: the young con man who won him over. In 2002, Spielberg made Catch Me If You Can, the true story of Frank Abagnale, a teenage con man who faked his way into being an airline pilot, a doctor, and a lawyer, all while cashing millions in forged checks. To play him, Spielberg cast Leonardo DiCaprio, who at the time was still mostly known as the heartthrob from Titanic. It is the only film the two of them have ever made together, which is strange when you consider how well it went. The shoot was famously fast and joyful. They filmed in 147 different locations in just 52 days, which is a punishing pace, and DiCaprio said scenes they expected to spend 3 days on were knocked out in a single afternoon. There was an electricity to it. What is interesting is how Spielberg's view of DiCaprio completely changed once he actually worked with him. Spielberg admitted that, like a lot of people, he had believed the tabloid version of Leo, the party boy image that followed him everywhere after Titanic. But once they were making the movie, Spielberg got to know his family, his mom and dad and his grandmother, and realized DiCaprio was a deeply grounded family guy, nothing like the headlines. He felt almost guilty for having believed the gossip. And Spielberg saw exactly why DiCaprio was perfect for a con man. He talked about the wily intelligence in the actor's eyes, this sharp, watchful quality that made you believe he could talk his way into or out of anything. DiCaprio, for his part, turned the tables in interviews, joking that Spielberg was the real con man, because the director famously talked his way onto a Hollywood studio lot as a young man and basically set up an office there before anyone hired him. There was even real creative back and forth between them. DiCaprio has said there was one scene he loved so much that he personally called Spielberg and begged him to keep it in the film, and Spielberg listened and kept it. The two have flirted with reuniting over the years, including talk of a film about President Ulysses S. Grant, though it has never quite happened. But Spielberg has never stopped praising him. Asked recently about his own films, DiCaprio was even asked his favorite Spielberg movie, and his answer was simple: Jaws. Now for the last actor. And this one is not about a great performance at all. It is about friendship, and it is the most emotional story on this entire list. The friend who called just to make him laugh. Robin Williams only made a couple of things with Spielberg. He starred as a grown-up Peter Pan in Hook in 1991, and he lent his voice to the film AI years later. On paper, that is a thin collaboration compared to the others on this list, but Robin Williams earns his place here for something that had nothing to do with a camera. In 1993, Spielberg was in Poland making Schindler's List. It was the hardest film of his life, a devastating, harrowing shoot about the Holocaust, filmed in the very country where those atrocities happened. Spielberg was carrying an enormous emotional weight every single day, surrounded by the darkest material imaginable, far from home, sinking under the heaviness of it all. And Robin Williams knew. So, on a regular schedule, Williams would pick up the phone and call him. Not to talk about business, not to check in on the movie. He would call and just launch into about 15 minutes of pure unscripted stand-up comedy, right down the line, performing his heart out for an audience of one. Spielberg has said he would laugh hysterically because he desperately needed to release all that pressure, all that grief he was absorbing. And here is the detail that makes it perfect. Robin Williams never said goodbye at the end of those calls. He would build to the biggest laugh he could get out of Spielberg, and then, right on that peak, he would just hang up, drop the mic, and vanish, leaving his friend laughing in the dark in Poland. A gift, asking for nothing in return. That is who Robin Williams was. And when he died in 2014, the loss hit Spielberg hard. He described his friend as a kind of lightning storm of comic genius, and said that their shared laughter had been the thunder that kept Williams going. He called him a pal and admitted he simply could not believe he was gone. One quick thing worth clearing up, because you will see it told wrong all over the internet. Those phone calls happened during Schindler's List, not during Hook. And Spielberg did not stop any film to mourn Williams. The truth is simpler and better. A comedian who understood pain better than almost anyone used his gift to carry a friend through the darkest work of his career. No performance required. So look at these 6 men together. The adventurer, Harrison Ford. The everyman, Richard Dreyfuss. The ghost-turned-president, Daniel Day-Lewis. The lifelong partner, Tom Hanks. The young con man, Leonardo DiCaprio. And the friend, Robin Williams. On the surface, they could not be more different. But there is a thread running through every one of these relationships, and it tells you something real about how Steven Spielberg works. He does not just hire actors. He builds trust with them. He lets Ford rewrite a scene on the spot. He casts Dreyfuss as a version of himself. He clears the room and surrenders control to Day-Lewis. He follows Hanks into a miserable boot camp and a dozen years of films. He throws out his assumptions about DiCaprio and finds the real person underneath. And he lets Robin Williams hang up on him, laughing, in the middle of the saddest shoot of his life. The greatest director of his era, the man with all the power in the room, is at his best when he hands a piece of that power to someone he believes in. That is the secret. Spielberg never named these 6 in some official list, but he did not have to. He named them with 30 years of phone calls, second chances, and films we will never forget. 6 actors, 5 decades, and one director who knew that the real magic was never just his alone. It was what happened when he found the right person to share the frame with. That is why these 6 stayed with him, and why their stories still hit so hard all these years later. If you liked this, hit like and subscribe, and make sure to check out our other videos.